He pressed her into the bed and nibbled on her mouth, chin, and neck for a long time before finally letting her go. He held her in his arms and pressed her against his chest intimately. He said hoarsely, "I've been paying attention to you since you came in when you were 13. Do you believe me?" Let her. At that time he was suspicious of her. This man had never dispelled his suspicions of her. Other people had been living with her for so many years, but he had left the base for 2 or 3 years, but he still saw through it. Although he didn't say it clearly and she didn't ask much, he clearly wasn't surprised when she confessed to him in the Snake Valley. "Why did you ask so much? You only need to know that I only have eyes for you, right?" The man lowered his head and kissed the top of her head again. Feng Ling actually wanted to complain, but hearing his straightforward confession, her face heated up. She wanted to get up from his arms, but the man refused to let go. "Don't move. I'll hold you for a while longer." "Boss, you should go back to your room to sleep. Otherwise you'll have to take a cold shower again tonight." The man immediately snorted. "Do you know how uncomfortable it is for me to endure it every day? So why don't you grow up quickly? I'll give you 3 years. It should be enough for you to grow up." Feng Ling secretly rolled her eyes. He had already eaten her up before she had even grown up. But he didn't remember it. She didn't have anyone to reason with. Feng Ling almost fell asleep in Li Nanheng's arms. The room was so quiet that she really felt sleepy. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Feng Ling opened her eyes abruptly and sat up quickly. Li Nanheng was also about to fall asleep. He was woken up by the sound and the girl in his arms suddenly struggled out of his arms. He frowned and looked at the door with some irritation. "It's so late. Who knocks on the door?" Li Nanheng asked. Feng Ling didn't know. She had been in the base for so long. Those who were close to her usually knew that her room was not very close at night. Especially after she moved next door to Boss Li, those people were very sensible and never came to disturb her. Who could knock on the door at this time unless it was... She turned back and gave Li Nanheng a look, meaning for him to quickly go back to his room through the window. The man lay on the bed and didn't move. He had no intention of hiding in his room. He just raised his cold brows and watched her walk to the door. The door was opened. Immediately, 2 young men around 15 or 16 years old grinned at her. "Master Feng Ling, we just heard that you are here. Did we disturb your rest? Today we have a few things to take note of in the base. When we called you we found that your phone was turned off, so we came to look for you." Feng Ling looked at the 2 boys outside the door and the corner of her mouth twitched. Anyway, according to Kay and the others' understanding of her, if she was too drunk to get out of bed tomorrow and didn't go to training, Kay and the others would find a suitable reason to ask for leave for her. In short, it didn't matter even if she was drunk. Get drunk once. She would forget everything after getting drunk once. The short-haired girl leaned against the balcony, raised the wine in her hand again, took a big sip, and then swallowed it with a frown. And then, one sip after another and another sip after another. But even though she felt that she was in a trance, Feng Ling felt that she was unprecedentedly sober. She knew very well that behind the name Feng Ling was an unknown orphan, a small role who couldn't bring any benefits to the Li family, and an existence that even she didn't know how to survive in this world. Early the next morning, Feng Ling, who had slept drunk on the balcony all night, felt her body was suddenly cold and hot, and her head was splitting. She turned over and opened her eyes, only to find that she had fallen asleep on the balcony. The weather last night was almost -3 or 4 degrees, but she actually fell asleep here in a short-sleeved t-shirt. Enduring the headache, she was about to sit up, but suddenly she heard a violent and urgent knock on the door. Seeing the packs of sanitary napkins on the ground and the long strips of cloth in the suitcase, which were suspected to be chest wrappings, the members of the base all looked at her differently. Some were surprised, some were enlightened, and some were confused. Was Feng Ling really a woman? Feng Ling raised her head with some difficulty. Her eyes were filled with the discomfort of the hangover and the anger in her heart because the truth had been revealed. More and more red veins appeared in her eyes. She grabbed the hard soil on the ground and raised her head to look at the elders who were looking at her with disdain and anger. "Feng Ling, do you need us to say more?" Li Junyan looked at the things used by women on the ground and his eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and disdain. Feng Ling's hands were still gripping the ground tightly, and she looked at him with reddened eyes. He was Li Nanheng's biological grandfather. Last time, when she was in trouble in the military in order to protect Li Nanheng's image, he had more or less spoken up for her in front of the military. Although his direct purpose was to protect Li Nanheng and the Li family's image, they had still met once. Li Nanheng's eyes were red. The other elders stood behind Li Junyan and whispered to each other, Mingzhu has always suspected this. I didn't believe it, but I didn't expect it to be true. Fortunately, Mingzhu found the evidence. Otherwise we wouldn't have come here. If we didn't know about this, we would have allowed such a little girl to stir up trouble in the base. That's right. It's outrageous. A young girl actually pretended to be a man and mingled with a group of men. Nanheng was so protective of her and ignored the Feng family's engagement. I think he must have been bewitched by this little vixen. These words were just a private discussion among the elders. Boss Li Junyan still looked coldly at Feng Ling, who was lying on the ground. You hid in the base for so long. What's your purpose? Kay and the others were also in the crowd. When they saw those things, they knew that the rumors were true. However, seeing Feng Ling lying there in a dazed and seemingly weak state, they remembered that Boss Li had just gotten married yesterday. It must have hurt her a lot. Today, the elders of the Li family actually came to find her. Looking at the things on the ground, it proved that she was indeed a woman. Kay and the members of the sniper team looked at each other, and their faces were all a bit ugly. Of course, their faces were ugly not because the fact that Feng Ling was a woman had been exposed, but because Feng Ling looked like she could be slaughtered at any time, which really made them unable to bear it. However, the elders of the Li family were all here, and they couldn't say or do anything. If they stood up to help Feng Ling up now, the rumor that Feng Ling had messed up the base would be confirmed. So, I've already been denied by 11 base, right? Really? How dare you ask me? What right do you have to ask me? Li Junyan scolded coldly. It's already polite of us to use this method to confirm that you are a woman instead of asking people to strip you naked. Do you think you can still stay in 11 base? Hearing this, the only hope in Feng Ling's heart was instantly shattered. She had once thought that if she could no longer keep her secret, perhaps she would find a suitable time to leave. Perhaps she would die outside during a mission. That way no one would know about it. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. However, it seemed that everything did not go in the direction she thought. She was actually kicked out of 11 base in such a humiliating way. She was about to be kicked out of this place where she had lived for several years, the home she thought was her home. She lowered her head and continued to laugh, digging her fingers into the mud again. So, Mr. Li, do you mean to drive me away today? She asked hoarsely. Seeing her lying on the ground weakly but still so proud, the other elders walked over and said coldly, Little girl, who gave you the courage to live in 11 base for so long? What the base taught you is to show how powerful you are as a woman here. Everything you have now is given to you by 11 base. I think the money you have earned from missions over the years is enough for you, an orphan with no parents, to live a good life outside. We didn't confiscate all your things but just let you leave the base. Why do you come back to bite us? An orphan with no parents. Feng Ling gritted her teeth and finally managed to sit up. Sitting on the ground, no one came to help her. Most people didn't want to help her, and a small number of people didn't dare to help her. She staggered to her feet with great effort, but she stood there swaying with the smell of alcohol all over her body. When she finally stood firm, her legs were so weak that she could fall at any time. She smiled and raised her eyes to look at them. So you've investigated me thoroughly and then came to the base to throw my things on the ground, just to let everyone see that I, Feng Ling, am a woman, and then under such circumstances, you chased me away and made it impossible for me to return to 11 base in the future, right? You still want to come back? The elders immediately glanced at her coldly, their eyes full of disdain. Feng Ling smiled coldly. Since I was driven out so shamelessly and disgracefully, how could I come back? It's good that you know. The base will not accept you again. With that, the elders turned around and walked into the base hall with the help of a few base members who were good at reading eyes. Obviously, they would no longer pay attention to her. Since the elders had left, the people around them didn't dare to watch anymore and gradually dispersed. However, there were still people who would point in her direction and make comments. Feng Ling still left. From the moment she stepped out of 11 base, she was no longer a person of this place. She had no right to use any means of transportation here. So she couldn't drive. The only thing she could take away was her shabby suitcase. As for those left in the room, they were just some toiletries and combat clothes. After leaving 11 base, she couldn't wear the combat clothes here anymore. It didn't matter whether she took them or not. Other things would definitely be thrown away and destroyed as soon as possible. Things related to her would probably be shameful in 11 base from now on. She had gone back and forth in front of the gate of 11 base countless times. But there had never been a time like this. When he walked to the door, he looked at the railing below the main door, lifted his foot and stepped over it, then walked straight out. A few minutes later, Feng Ling's figure gradually disappeared in front of the main gate of the base. She stopped but didn't look back. She just stood there for 2 seconds before continuing to walk forward expressionlessly. Kay and the others stood at the gate of the base looking at her back, their eyes red but they couldn't say a word. How could this be? Why did it become like this? Who can find a way to contact boss? If boss doesn't come back, Feng Ling will really leave. The elders of the Li family clearly know that boss has been protecting Feng Ling, so they deliberately drove Feng Ling away when boss was not here. Today they even gathered so many people here to watch. Now even if boss can bring Feng Ling back, Feng Ling can't continue to stay here as a man. How can she continue to survive here? Be rational. But what did Feng Ling do wrong? She is not as delicate as a woman at all. Tell me, when did she cheat in training and assessment? When was she not the best one? What's the point of saying this? In Los Angeles there were not many scenes of sleet. However, it snowed today and the temperature was not low enough, so it became sleet. There were not many vehicles around 11 base, and no car dared to casually approach the vicinity. Under normal circumstances, people who wanted to leave 11 base had to drive out by the base's car or other means of transportation sent by the base. But now Feng Ling admitted that she shouldn't have drunk last night. As long as she didn't drink and didn't lie outside for so long, she wouldn't become like this. Even if she was found to be a woman, at least she wouldn't be lying on the ground and being insulted by others. But now it was too late to say anything. What she shouldn't have done the most was to let Li Nanheng steal her heart so easily. She shouldn't have given all her bottom line to him. Her biggest mistake was to fall in love with Li Nanheng. She just liked him. She didn't know what love was. But what was the pain in her heart that had spread to her limbs and bones since yesterday? Was it just love? Li Nanheng did not say much and turned to enter the bathroom. At first Feng Ling did not speak. However, when the man was about to enter her bedroom, her gaze suddenly changed. She abruptly raised her eyes to look over. Seeing that the man had already entered, she hurriedly followed him. By the time she reached the bedroom door, the man had already stepped into the bathroom. He was about to turn on the faucet when he saw something from the corner of his eye and turned to look. Feng Ling was about to shout, "Don't look." However, when the words were about to come out of her mouth, she felt that these two words were very strange. She couldn't help but stiffen. As expected, she saw the man's back stiffen for an instant. She was no longer dressed as a man. Although she wore sportswear every day, at least her underwear was normal. Every day, her underwear that she washed would be hung on a small drying rack above the bathroom. Right now there were 2 sets of underwear on it, one white and the other flesh-colored. There was also a set of black sports-style underwear that she was wearing. Li Nanheng was only stunned for a moment. It seemed that he had long been used to having no taboos wherever Feng Ling was. After all, she had never had these things in her room before. He turned to look at Feng Ling, who was looking a little awkward. Feng Ling was only embarrassed for a moment. She glanced at the faucet by his hand. "After washing your face, hurry up and leave." Li Nanheng did not say anything. He washed his hands in the slightly cold water for a while before lowering his head to wash his face. Feng Ling could not be bothered to look at him. She turned to leave. The man washed his face very quickly. He casually washed his face a few times. It was likely that he knew that she did not have much patience with him right now. He did not use her towel and directly walked out with his face wet. He casually wiped his face with his hands and walked to the coffee table to pull out a few pieces of tissue paper to wipe his face. As the man wiped the water that was about to drip down his chin, he said, "There's a problem with your toaster. I haven't eaten anything all day. Right now, even if I want to leave, I don't have the strength." Each reason was more lame than the other. Feng Ling had long expected that he would not leave so easily. However, she also lost her patience. She walked to the sofa, picked up his coat and threw it on him. "Even if you have to crawl, you have to get out." Li Nanheng received the coat and casually placed it in the crook of his arm. He then looked at her. "So heartless." Feng Ling sneered. "Heartless is also related to love. Don't think too highly of yourself. There's nothing to talk about between us. It's just that there's no need to keep a distance between us. Mr. Li, on account of the fact that you were my boss and that you took good care of me, I allowed you to come in and sleep for a day. However, I'm sorry, you have already exceeded my tolerance." Li Nanheng smiled. He suddenly threw the coat in his hand back onto the sofa. The smile in his eyes was gone. He looked at her and his voice was cold and angry. Your tolerance? What did you think the 2 years you were missing meant to me? The beige chased you out and you ran away without a word. You didn't even think to look for me? Why would I look for you? Did you abandon your new wife, put aside your honeymoon period and return to the base to save me? Feng Ling looked at him coldly. Even if I, Feng Ling, am a child raised by a wolf and don't understand the ways of the world, at least I know my own limits. New wife? Honeymoon period? Li Nanheng suddenly wanted to curse. However, it seemed that he could only curse himself. Back then he had rejected Feng Mingzhu, and because the relationship between the two families could not be too stiff, how could he have thought of marrying a child cenotaph? All along he had never had any concept of women. Back then, why didn't he think that he would really fall in love with a girl in this life? The man raised his hand and placed it on his forehead. He knocked himself hard twice. Damn it, Feng Ling said coldly. I remember that Feng Mingzhu hated me very much. It's probably because she saw the things between you and me. After all, you are her husband now. There are some things that you don't need me to remind you of. Please leave. Li Nanheng gritted his teeth. I didn't marry Feng Mingzhu. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.